Welcome to this week's conversation with Pam Hosel. I am so excited to have Shellie Finholm as my guest today. Shellie, I've been so envious as I've watched you say no to a lot of things and say an exuberant yes to going on how many Caminos now?
Three, three,
You've
three plus.
gone on 3 Caminos. So this episode is all committed. This week, I want to talk to people about the power of no, right? That no makes room for yes. And so many of us fill our lives with things that maybe aren't exuberant yeses, or we don't have time to do these amazing adventures that you have somehow figured out how to do. So today is all about, listener, the Camino, figuring out how to say a big no and make the room for a month-long, week-long adventure. And I want to learn more about the Camino because I'm going to go next year.
Thank you, Pam. And I am very excited about September of 2022 when you and I embark on the Camino Portuguese.
Yes, it'll be your fourth, it'll be my first. Conversations with Pam Hosel is sponsored by Entrepreneur Ready and Dear Rockstar, the book. Entrepreneur Ready is a global entrepreneurship training program that runs an idea accelerator in the cloud to accelerate inclusive, equitable entrepreneurship and ownership, helping anyone, anywhere turn their ideas into reality. A side income, replacing a job, becoming CEO, and ownership. We believe that when those things are possibilities for any resident in every community and region of the world, then and only then will we have justice, equality, and the financial power for people to change the things and show up being the change they most want to be. Dear Rockstar, the book is a collaboration between Rockstar graphic designer Alicia Feinberg and myself. 52 letters to inspire and rock your life, to recognize and celebrate the rock stars on your team, in your life, and stories to remind all of us on how to stay inspired and how to squeeze the beauty out of all of life's ups and downs. Okay, so rewind. What were the circumstances surrounding you deciding to take your first Camino?
Well, being raised as a Christian, non-Catholic Christian, I was fairly shocked at about 56 years of age to even hear for the first time about El Camino de Santiago, even though it's been a centuries long entity. The Camino was first established in like the 8th century, and I have it here too, 813, I think 814. So in medieval times, I think just hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people walked the Camino. And so it's been walked since eight or 900, the 8th and 9th centuries. But I had never heard of it. And I have a girlfriend, she travels extensively. She was taking a tour to Spain, and she happened to mention to me, describing her upcoming tour, that she was going to be able to spend 3 days on the Camino de Santiago. And my interest was piqued, and I said, the what? And she explained a little bit about what it was and instructed me to watch the movie The Way, which debuted in 2010. And again, this is like 4 years ago. I had never heard of even that movie, although a lot of people have. So I came home from work, probably watched that movie, Pam, within a day or two. And I just knew, God just told me, this is something you're meant to do. And I didn't question it. My excitement was almost palpable. And I want to say that was around September. And I embarked then on my journey in May of 18. So it was probably September of 17 when I heard about it, started planning right away, started, compiling my internet knowledge and and set my sights then for May of 18 and requested the time off work and all kinds of things like that.
Prior to that, had you done any athletic feats? Like I think of going and making a commitment to walk for 30 days. Had you ever done anything like that?
No, my athletic pinnacle was high school basketball.
Okay, so it wasn't like, okay, so did you, so what was getting ready like? It feels like you had some kind of like just a spiritual knowing that you had to do it.
Yeah.
And then
Well,
what did you do to get ready? And most of us would have a lot of fear around that, like the unknown.
yeah. Um, First of all, I should preface this by saying I was the blessed recipient of a hip replacement, left hip replacement in May of 2017. So it's been a little over 4 years now. And I think coming that close to the realization at, I think, a relatively young age of, I think I was 56, that I might have permanently lost my mobility for the rest of my life really made me want to get out there and just prove something to myself and maybe the universe, I'm not sure. So I wanted to kind of embrace that physical challenge because I'd been given this gift of strength and mobility and diminishment of pain. So I have been a walker for the last decade or so. I live in Edmonds, Washington, and we have a lot of hills and valleys and flat areas, and you can go out for a 2-hour walk and get a little bit of every terrain out there. So it can really be, a 6 to 7 mile walk can be an amazing workout. And I had been doing that for about a decade just prior to my hip suddenly failing on me. So I knew I loved to walk.
Okay. So how did you get ready?
Okay.
So what was the most surprising to you in terms of the experience?
The experience overall.
The average day, yeah, and the experience overall.
I think my very biggest takeaway or just my I think what struck me honestly was, and to this day I can just shut my eyes and see it all, is just the beauty of every turn around the bend. You're walking along a busy road, literally sometimes on the pavement, sometimes there's a trail built next to the highway. Some days you're crossing, what they call a meseta, which is like, a prairie with wheat growing and rolling hills. Some days you are in a wooded forest, crossing through streams on rocks. Literally 15 minutes to 15 minutes, you didn't know what you would experience around every single corner in terms of just the physical beauty and, the trees and the foliage and the ferns and the slugs and the snails and the little mice that ran across your trail and the little mosses and mushrooms that sprout up out of the walls that, you turn a corner and you walk into a small ancient village, sometimes deserted, with stone walls on either side. And you've got these like microcosms of life that you just don't see here at home. And just the magic of all of it and how old it is and how you're just one of millions of pilgrims that has walked through that same path and put your hand out on that same wall.
So share a little bit on the average day. Let's give them a high level. You've gone on 3 so far. Tell us which ones and how long they each were. And then we'll talk about how you decided to do this crazy thing.
Okay. Well, my first Camino, it's called the El Camino, which translates into English as the way, was in May of 2018. And that was, of course, the original, the most popular Camino Francais. And that Camino was roughly, let's see, I have it on a note card here, 700 78 kilometers, and I believe it took me 34 walking days to complete that one. That route is across northern Spain, but definitely well away from the coast, starting in a town just inside, on the outer edge of France called Saint-Jean, and then ending in Santiago de Compostela.
All right. So that one was 34 days. That was your first one. And
Yeah.
then the second one.
Second one was September. Boy, this is taxing my brain here. September 2019. And I had heard a lot about the Camino del Norte, which again is northern Spain. Probably the third most popular Camino, according to fable. Starting in a little town called Irun, which I believe is actually in was that in? I can't remember if Irun is actually in France or on the edge of Spain there, to be honest. I do think it is in Spain. And that one was actually a little bit longer. I looked that up today. It was like 830 kilometers. And that took me actually about 31 days. I did a little bit better in terms of pacing and distance on that second one. Probably the most gorgeous Camino that exists, with views of the ocean almost constantly, of the Atlantic there. So, and then took the break off for pandemic, of course, took off 2020, and then resumed this year by the grace of God, September 13th. And this Camino for me, Pam, was more of a it was more of a physical quest, more so even than spiritual this time. And I chose the Camino Primitivo. With my age, I didn't want to spend a whole lot more years wondering about that one. I wanted to kind of see if I could manage that physically challenging, considered the most physically challenging Camino. That one was, I wrote it down, excuse me, it was 309 kilometers, and I walked that in about 16 days. And that takes you through the inner, all of these trails, all three of these are northern Spain. This takes you into the interior of Asturias and through a mountain range called the Hospitales.
Wow. Thinking about going on our first ones, what should we do based on what you know? Yeah.
Well, there's all kinds of schools of thought on that. And when you can join these different Camino forums and blogs and Facebook groups. There's a great one called American Pilgrims on the Camino on Facebook. There's a great internet forum called Casa de Ivor, run by a guy named Ivor who lives in Santiago, although he is actually from Norway, I believe, originally. So there's all these great groups that you can tap into and learn a lot about how to physically prepare, how to emotionally prepare, how to prepare your supplies, what to pack, tips, tricks, all that kind of stuff. And so I certainly did spend weeks and weeks and weeks in my spare time in the evening when I had it online, preparing my lists of what I wanted. I knew my necessities to pack, a sleeping bag, toothbrush, all that kind of stuff, lightweight gear, to preparing spiritually or just emotionally with meditation, which honestly I didn't do. And preparing physically, which, recommended the longer day walks, maybe 8, 9, 10, 12 kilometers with your pack, and then gradually load your pack, up to your baseline weight, which might be somewhere around 20 pounds. And to practice walking with that. And honestly, in my very busy life, which we all have busy lives, but in my very busy life, I was getting walks in, but nothing that you would consider training. And I did have solace in the fact that there was a lot of people that posted that you could accomplish the the Camino, without a lot of prior training and without being ridiculously physically fit. And I just really believe that. And I think just my true belief in the power of the brain gets you through that initial week when you're not in the shape could possibly win. And then, as I told you before, part of me didn't want to train so hard with this new hip because I knew that if I got hurt before I went, that I couldn't go. And I would, I would honestly rather get hurt when I was in pain and then spend the remaining of my time, the remaining time that I may have over there if I had a knee injury or ankle injury or whatever, hanging out and being a tourist. But part of it was fear of, overdoing it here at home. That would maybe preclude me from going.
Yeah. So when you think about your first Caminos and your Caminos with us, what's that like?
Okay. So generally speaking, the traditional pilgrim will spend their nights in what's called an albergue. And it's basically either a municipal or city-owned building with bunk beds, warm showers, almost always warm showers, don't be afraid. Or you might bump up to a privately owned albergue, which has a few more bells and whistles. There might be a blanket, there might be, clean towels, there might be a meal included or a meal that you can buy for extra, whether it's breakfast or dinner. Or you can bump up to a small hotel. Basically, the price range at this time runs between €6 for a municipal albergue and can go up to, say, €99 if you want to spend the night literally in a palace, in a renovated palace in a big city.
What is that comparative in the dollar right now? $6.99 is.
Yeah, it's pretty close. I think that my €1 might be around $1.20.
Okay.
I mean, you can be staying in a building that's 300 to 400 years old that is a renovated actual palace and pay $100. So students, especially, and young people during their gap year, and they're getting away on their Caminos $10 a night, probably €10 a night. It's very, very, what's the word? It's a very, very financially manageable vacation, if you want to call it that.
So the average day is started.
Yeah. So the average day is you kind of set your goal to know that you're going to start waking up around 6, because that's when you're going to hear the first rustling, maybe of others in your room, or maybe you set your alarm for that time in hopes of being up by 6:30. Crawl to bed. It's always still dark. And you just kind of, get your stuff together, pack up your sleeping bag, change your clothes, wash your face, brush your teeth, brush your hair, and pack everything up, which takes a shocking amount of time in those big backpacks with everything that you're carrying for,
How many pounds did you say you were carrying?
I'm usually around 22, unfortunately. I just haven't been able to quite bump it down. I would love to be around 15, 18 pounds. So that's just a goal I continue to aspire for. But Pam, I'm certain it's the mascara that I'm carrying.
Okay, so you pack up your bag. Yep. You're at 6:30, and then
you walk out of your room, you head downstairs or out the door. Sometimes the hospitalero is the man that runs the albergue or the pension, and hospitalera is the female counterpart. And sometimes breakfast is offered for €3 to €5. Sometimes it's included with the price you pay, and oftentimes it's not included at all. But you're in a small town or community usually, and you'll step out and you'll figure out where the closest bar is. And bar and cafe is used interchangeably, so don't think we're heading out at 7 a.m. to a bar to have a drink. But you'll find your nearest bar where you'll go in, and absolutely the very first thing you do is get a cafe con leche. And 1 or 2 of those, and they usually serve you a little biscuit or a piece of cake with that, and you're on your way. So you might have a 22-kilometer day plan, a 29-kilometer day plan. You might have your end goal in sight for the day. You might not, which is the beauty of carrying your pack versus having a transportation service that you would pay €5 a day, have it transported to the next town, which is an amazing option for certain days or for certain people. But you leave with your pack and you kind of have an idea of where you're going to end up. But you just never know, depending on weather and terrain. Sometimes it's a lot hillier or rougher than you expect. Sometimes it's a lot hotter than you expect. Sometimes it's so incredibly rainy in northern Spain that you can tromp for 8 hours in the pouring rain. You don't make as good of distance, and you maybe will choose to stop at a town maybe 6 kilometers sooner than you had planned. So that is the beauty of carrying your pack, is that it gives you the flexibility to stop when and where you want.
And what have you learned about best practices of confirming having a place to stay by the time you get somewhere? Talk to us about your experiences with that.
Yeah. So there's so many schools of thought. And for someone considering a pilgrimage, the most important thing to remember, Pam, is that whatever you choose is the right way, and it is your Camino, and nobody can judge it. So that's what's so beautiful about your pilgrimage, is that it's personal and it's yours. You know, it's your spiritual journey. It's your journey, you know, finding yourself, maybe seeing yourself in a different way, in a way you haven't for years. Lot of schools of thought. So there are purists out there, and I love them and admire them, who walk each day with no reservation and really no even destination in mind. And they just stop when they're tired or when something looks good, with faith that they will find an albergue or a pension or hotel with availability. The worst words out there are the word completo, which means we're full, go away. There's other people who have pre-booked their entire trip online, because there's a lot of internet resources for reaching these different albergues via email or via phone. And people use the WhatsApp to message to the phone number of these different albergues, and they can have their whole itinerary planned out for, 30 days or 15 days, and knowing what town they're going to stop in each night, and they've got a reservation. And then there's someone more like me, who I kind of know where I'm going to land every night, but I don't typically, I would say maybe 30% of the time I have a pre-booking, which either I've gotten the day before or the morning of, again, using my cell phone or WhatsApp to reach out to them.
And that's reliable, Shellie. So if we have WhatsApp on our phones and we're pre-ready with our route, we can have a list of all the albergues on our route.
Yeah, there's so many resources now out there for the albergues that exist on the route and their contact information. The ones that don't take reservations are the municipals, the city-owned ones that are like 5 to 6 euros. Those are first come, first serve, and they can be completo by noon or 2 p.m. And those are usually for the faster, younger walkers, to be honest.
And that's why people are getting out early. If they're trying to get always to those municipals, those are going to fill up early.
Little head out 6:30 in the dark with a headlamp, and that's their Camino. That's their pilgrimage, and that's wonderful. I would love to be one of those people, but as you know, I'm not a morning person. So for me to even be out by 8 is like awesome.
So talk to us a little bit about this issue of, tell us and give us an example. You've had examples where you've had to use a cab maybe to go ahead and then bring you back to where you are, and how you navigate that kind of a night.
Yeah, my most recent, I just came back from my Camino last month. And my most recent stand in my mind experience is the very hardest day of my Primitivo walk was actually through the very, very, very top of the Hospitales range. And it was about a 26-kilometer walk. People passed me along the way, but otherwise I was pretty much totally alone. And the town I was shooting for, at the end of the day, still about 3 kilometers a day, I took a break next to a guardrail with a fading light, I might add, and I started calling the 4 albergues listed in this fairly small town. And I believe one didn't answer, one had closed, like they had closed from the pandemic, And what I could ascertain from the other two was that they were completo or full. So I'm like, oh boy. Now on faith, I should have just continued to walk into that town and go door to door because I would have found somewhere to stay. But in the moment of panic, when it's getting dark at 7:45 at night, I went ahead and Googled taxi with a local taxi driver who was at the bar in the town where I was, headed towards, and he was just waiting for a call to pick someone up. I had just emerged from a trail, Pam, onto a highway that had actual kilometer markers. He said, "Where are you?" I said, "Kilometer 30, whatever." And he said, "Don't move." And he came and got me. And that is the beauty of the Camino. I mean, you hear it over and over and over, and it's cliche, but it's so true. The Camino provides. So this young man came and got me in my 22-pound pack and my poles, and I think I was still sweaty from the day. And he took me beyond that small town to another town, the next town, stayed in a beautiful lodge overlooking a dam. And then the next morning, I just took a cab straight back to my stopping point and resumed. So it's a little more expensive to pay some cab fees if you get caught into that situation, but taxi cabs are, for the most part, available.
All right.
Yeah.
So tell us about, everyone has different ideas of what the Camino is. Some people go on, it's very much a spiritual thing. People are at different levels of their own, what it means to them. For you, what is your Caminos meant?
Well, I kind of knew right from the get-go when I heard about the Camino from my beautiful friend Carolyn, that it was something my spirit was calling me to do. So it was definitely a very spiritual calling for me. And the beauty of that is, yeah, you get home, and yes, you get caught back up in day-to-day living, but the awareness and the new knowledge of self, and just honestly, the self-esteem you get from accomplishing something like that alone, relying on your own mental stamina, strength, faith, perseverance, what's the word? Enhancing your physical abilities, that doesn't completely leave you. So that's the beauty of, then going on another Camino, I was able to kind of refresh and rebuild on that. And so it was very much for me a spiritual quest. I'm a nurse. I really just needed, back in 2018, I just really needed some time alone, away from family, away from work, away from friends. I had a friend really want to come along with me, and it was one of the hardest things I've had to do, to tell her no. And that's what the spiritual draw was for me, just that time to be alone physically, alone mentally, and really learn about a different part of myself.
You and I've talked about how you'll meet people on the Camino that said, "Oh, I've been thinking about doing this for 10 years. And it doesn't matter, like in entrepreneurship or whatever, we always hear, and I've been trying to do this for 10 years, or I've had this idea forever." Or what did you do to clear out, not the prep time and then the month?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I just had this, like I said, when I first learned about the Camino, I just had this intense calling to do it.
Have you ever had that with anything else?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean,
So you've worked on medical, international, you've traveled internationally to do nursing.
right.
Did it not feel the same as the calling for this thing?
This calling was personal. It was for me.
Mm.
And I think one thing I'm learning now as a nurse in my 38th year is, first and foremost, Pam, we have to take care of ourselves and family before our career and our friends. And that's just where I was. I needed to do something really selfish. And that's actually, I don't say that with shame. Being able to go and do a Camino, especially for the length of time that I get to do it, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, it's a wonderful form of selfish. And I'm very blessed that my husband is one of those people that can allow me to do that kind of thing with, and not feeling like he's got to exert any kind of control.
Yeah, or go with you. Out of here, I'm leaving.
He has shown up at the end of all my Caminos, by the way, hasn't he?
Yay, him.
Yeah. In fact, I have to tell you now that a Camino probably wouldn't feel right if he didn't come over for the last week of it and you know, hang out. So
celebrate.
yeah.
So, but go back to when you did the first one, what did you do specific? I mean, you had to kind of make the time, months preparing and then 6 weeks off. What did you, how?
Yeah. So right away, I researched when was best to go. And definitely knew that I'm not a hot summer gal, and very clear on the internet and I knew I was going to do the Francais, you know, the most popular route, the route that's, you know, most people do eventually at some point in their life. June, July, and August was out. It's too hot and there are just too many people. There is definitely a competition for beds. They call it a bed race. So the times that were recommended were May or September. And so keep in mind, this was September, if I'm recalling correctly. I didn't want to wait till next September. I wanted to go as soon as possible. And like I said, I was recovering from this hip surgery, and I knew in May I'd be basically a year out from the surgery, from the replacement. And so, yeah, I was going for May. And I just think I lucked. Oh yeah. So from September of my planning to May, it gave me just enough time to solidify enough PTO hours to be able to take, you know, that much time off. Working 30 to 32 hours a week, you know, I don't have to use as much PTO to get a chunk of time off.
Yeah.
And then guarding all my PTO. So I researched when the best time to go. I put in for time off work, and I made absolutely sure that I wasn't taking a vacation day here and there, calling in sick, you know, that kind of thing, to keep guarded. And started doing the research online for what I was going to need and what I was going to need to buy, which honest to goodness isn't a whole lot outside of a nice backpack that fits you and a great pair of shoes, hoka, and walking poles. But pretty much a lot of everything else you need day to day, you're going to have already in your house. I truly believe that. And then of course, I just started telling everybody about it. And when you start telling people about it, you think you're going to change your mind?
Yeah,
No.
it commits you. That is such a great strategy. So you just started confirming, I'm going.
And I just feel so selfishly blessed that I heard about the Camino. And for some reason, I just needed to do it. And, you know, again, maybe age is a factor there, and the fact that my girls were launched, and the fact that my husband is secure enough letting me go do what I want for X number of weeks. And I am amazed when I hear people my age or younger or even older saying, wow, you know, I can't believe you did it so soon after learning about it. It took me 10 years to do this. So I just feel like, you know, God moved and I listened.
So tell us about, there's challenging times on this. I follow you on Facebook, and I feel like sometimes reading between the lines, like, oh, she wants to quit today. So tell us about your most challenging time on the Camino.
Oh boy, I should have researched that question, because, you know, you get home and everything becomes kind of rosy again.
Kind of like after pregnancy. I'll do it again.
Oh, I know. Just up the Primitivo, you know, at the end of September, I believe I said publicly on Facebook that I would never ever walk this trail again.
I think you did.
I did, and I can't wait to get back and tackle that trail again, because it's not a long trail. You know, it's a 14-day walk. And it is some of the most beautiful countryside you'll ever see. And it is physically challenging. And I definitely want to go back with a little bit more strength in my legs to really enjoy it a little bit more. And I think too, next time I'm just going to walk completely on faith and just see where I end up every night. That is also one of my really big goals, is to, with each trip, do a little bit more walking each day on faith, just knowing that whatever little town or community I end up in, the Camino will provide without a lot of pre-planning.
Okay, I want to go to that because I know you've had some kind of crazy, miraculous things that have happened to you on the Camino, like that story about the losing your poles. But the hardest day you've had, and when you look back at it on the Camino, what is hard?
Okay, wow. I wonder which Camino I would pull from here. I've been blessed to not be injured on all of these walks, because that would make a day really hard or a moment really hard.
So you've done some things with your feet. I mean, because a lot of people struggle with their feet,
Yeah.
with blisters. What are your secrets on that area?
Well, I have a brand of shoes I really believe in, which is the Hoka One One. My first Camino I walked in just good running shoes. And my second and third Camino, I've actually walked in a pair of their lightweight hikers. They're not high tops, but they definitely are more of a hiking shoe.
Say that again. The name of the shoe.
Hoka One One. It looks like Hoka One, but it's Hoka One One. Hokas are just a really great brand of athletic shoe, especially runners and marathoners. But I use them as my day-to-day shoe for my nursing shifts and my neighborhood walks. And I have walked all three of my Caminos in that type of shoe. And just, they fit so well. They have such amazing arch support. Each Camino, I've gotten just a couple little blisters. I'm talking the size of half a pea, maybe on each toe.
So the sock thing, what's the key with socks and Band-Aids and wet feet and
Yep. Okay, so feet, it's so important because that's going to end your Camino or put you back 2 or 3 days if you just really aren't prepared for foot health. So first of all, you want to pack along moleskin that you can cut and trim and cover hot areas or early blistering areas. And also alternately, there's a brand out there called Compeed, used extensively all over Europe. And it's COMPEED. And it's almost like a second skin that you can cut and trim and, put onto a hot spot or again, an early blister. And you just leave it on as long as it'll stay, whether it's 2, 3, 4 days. So between Compeed and moleskin, you want to have both of those with you. And at the first sign of just some redness or a hot spot, you want to protect that area with one of those 2 coverings. And then you just leave them on for a couple of days. Even when they get wet, they just dry, if you shower or whatever. And then I am a firm believer, as are many women I've met, of sock liners. And there's a brand out there I think it's called Injie, INJINIE, something like that. And it's actually got this, it's a thin cotton or wool, because you can get a cotton or a wool. And it's a thin sock that your 5 toes each fit into the compartments, which those with cute socks that you wear around the house or holiday. But they're amazing. And you put those on, and then you just put on your regular hiking sock, which might be a Smart Wool or, one of those name brands. And that's what's key, is your great shoes, your blister protection, and 2 pairs of socks, one being the thin sock liner, because then the socks rub against each other with the friction, instead of the sock rubbing a single sock using your skin for friction.
Oh, the sock liner sounds like the key there. So
yeah, I've got 4 pairs now, to make sure my husband has a pair and my daughter has a pair and that I have 2 pairs.
awesome. Okay, your hardest moment. I mean, I'm assuming you've had a moment where you were close to feeling like, if I could, I would give up.
Yeah, I don't think I have.
Wow. So you never had a feeling like
Never.
too much.
Nope. I mean, I've had feelings where, okay, Shellie, maybe you need to slow this down. And that did happen this last trip, where I was like, wow, 22 kilometers isn't very far, or 25 kilometers isn't very far, but with this kind of up and down, it takes me a long time. And I came to a point kind of mid on this Primitivo trail where I'm like, you know what, Shellie, slow down, do 50 kilometers a day. Don't finish this time. Enjoy it. Take your time. Be that person at the cute albergue sitting outside with everyone else having a beer, at 2 o'clock instead of going, oh, I've got another 10 kilometers. I'll see you guys later. And so I made the resolve that I was going to do that. And I did that for one day. And then I woke up the next morning and went, what the heck are you doing? You are not coming home without, a Compostela. So then that put me another half day behind because I had only taken a half day. So yeah, I had a day where I had decided I was gonna, really change my whole Camino, take my time, not finish, come back, finish some other time. And then I changed my mind and jumped right back into getting my daily stages finished and staying on track. But it did put me another day behind for finishing. So no, I've never ever wanted to quit.
Wow.
When I'm soaked through to my underwear, or so hot, I'm sitting on the side of the trail eating chewy sprees because I think I'm going to pass out.
Eating what?
Chewy sprees. They're those little sugar candies.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I know you went on your Caminos to be alone, but I know the community on the Camino is a huge part. Talk to us about that.
The community on the Camino is unexpected. It's random, and it's the blessing continues on for several years. I mean, many years. I'm still in communication with people from my Camino from 2018, my Camino from 2019, and now on my Camino from 2021. And we message back and forth either with Facebook Messenger, or WhatsApp. And even on my last day of this Camino, Pam, my last day, I met a 22 or 23-year-old girl from Denmark who was beautiful and athletic and sun-kissed, and she wanted to spend time with me, and I couldn't understand that. And my last day was not the day I was expecting to make a new friend. And we walked together for a couple hours. We took an hour-long lunch break together, which I don't do because I'm always, on this schedule because I'm a slow walker. And I just relaxed, said, I'm what I'm supposed to be doing today. And later on, she said, before we parted ways, she goes, thank you for letting me spend time and walk with you today. I really needed it. And she'd been just in a slump, having gotten ahead of friends a couple days, and she was going on to Finisterre, which is the outer edge of Spain on the Atlantic coast. And so she knew she wasn't going to be meeting up with her friends again. And she was just at a low. So yeah, a couple months later, we're still checking in, and I would never expected a new friend on the very last day of the Camino. So
what are evenings like at the albergues? And
well, they can be, again, the whole gamut. You can end up at an albergue with one other person, two other people who each have gone out and gotten groceries and made their food, and they're bedding in for the night, and you're going out to walk in the dark 6 blocks to find an open bar to eat. And so it can be quiet and alone. And I'm not afraid to say lonely, because being lonely is part of this journey. You want to be lonely because it makes you appreciate the times when you're not. So you can have that extreme where you're almost alone in an albergue, and it's quiet and dark and maybe a little scary, though, when you're kind of alone in a municipal with 2 people you don't know, it's a little interesting. But you're there on faith, and knowing that God and the Camino will provide. To the full gamut of where you walk into an albergue and you're signing in, and then you look around and realize 4 other people from previous days, and everyone goes out to dinner together. Or you get into an albergue. I know on my very first trip. I just ended up in a little albergue that I was walking by. It looked kind of cute. It was in a big city. I don't recall the name. And I just poked my head in and asked if they had room for one, and they had room for me, one more. Well, that was amazing because I knew two other girls once I got up to the third floor. Your room's always going to be on the third or fourth floor, by the way, with your heavy pack when you're exhausted. And there are no elevators.
Mhm.
But that hospitalero was famous for cooking dinner for his guests. And I think there was 15 around this big oval table, and we had baked chicken and the best homemade bread full of grains and seeds that I'd ever had, and butter and pasta and some kind of moussey tiramisu thing for dessert. I mean, things that you would not even be able to get at a fine restaurant in Seattle. And the wine, they just keep pouring the wine, the house wine. It's just, a staple. So you can have some nights that are just fun and festive and communal, and other nights where you're just a little bit lonely and sad.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about the Camino always provides. Can you share a story where it just was?
Oh God, yeah. I'll try to be a little brief, but was it on the Norte? I think it was on the Norte. Oh boy, no, it was on the Francais. It was my third night, and again, takes me longer than everyone else to get where I'm going. And I pulled into this little town. I believe it was called Zarutz, and didn't have any kind of a reservation. Now this is 2018. There was a lot I still didn't know about pre-booking or even how to, find phone numbers, all that kind of stuff. And I started going door to door in this little town, and even the municipal was full because it's still only 3 days out of the start of the trail. And this was May, but May is still pretty busy on the Francais. So I'm wandering around town. I came to this one albergue that was private. I rang the bell. I stood and waited. No one came. So I kept wandering again. And some lady was looking out her window. Random. She comes out. She talks to me. She knows the owner of that albergue that I kind of just stood by the door. She calls her friend and says, "There's a pilgrim out here that needs help." And the lady was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just hadn't gotten to the door yet." But I was walking away. I mean, I was already honestly a block away, just not sure if I was going to be sleeping on a park bench that night. Now, this is only my third night ever on a Camino. So I still wasn't savvy to taxis, nothing, Yeah. And that lady saw me from her window, came down out of her apartment onto the street, talked to me, called her friend, and then directed me back to that private albergue. And then her friend opened the door, and there I was sleeping with 7 Italian men that night.
What's your sense on what would you say to someone about the safety?
Just as safe as anywhere else in the world, if not safer. And I will be very honest saying I have never felt unsafe in my lodging. I have never felt unsafe walking in the early morning hours, midday, late afternoon, but I have felt unsafe 3 or 4 times walking, say after 6:30, 6:45 p.m. And that's not something I plan to do at all in the future at all. It's just a time of night where most pilgrims, unless you're in a group, you should be in and settled somewhere. And it just seems like a pilgrim walking at that hour is a little bit more of a spectacle than they should be. And there have been a handful of times now in my three Caminos where I've felt uneasy as it starts to get dusky.
Hey, this letter, The Power of No, and if you can see the visual, it's no makes room for yes, which has become a mantra in my own life. I don't know about you. I know I have FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. But this is kind of how I've addressed it. Dear Rockstar, when you were little and you were baking cookies, after you downed 3, you begged for another. And even though I hated to see those fat little cheeks quiver, I said no. I had to. And well, that, my dear, is the truth about no. No isn't easy. Declining invitations, opportunities, and relationships takes courage. Who hasn't suffered from the fear of missing out? Instead of rushing to yes, imagine a gap arising between every situation you face and your response. Evaluate your options, listen to your gut, consider what you value. Choice by choice, decision by decision, a life is made, dear. Refuse to allow maybe, kinda, and perhaps to dilute your life. The best choices are those you make with a resounding and exuberant yes. Own your no. Elevate no to superhero status because no makes room for yes. The freedom to be wonderfully selfish and to say no to those things that would keep you and I from our best life and from what truly matters right now. Have a great day, Rockstar. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what when you think of people that haven't taken their first Camino, what would your advice be?
Oh, I would say learn everything you can about it. And again, the internet's your best source, even before you buy a guidebook. Maybe join a Camino forum or American Pilgrims on the Camino. And I think there's even way more groups than that. And, the more information you get, the more your heart's going to tell you if this is something you're meant to do, or if the time is now, or if you're ready, or, it'll solidify in your heart if this is going to be what you're meant to do. But there's so much education out there now. We're kind of blessed in the area.
The biggest impact on you, Shellie, you've come home. How would you describe the impact in terms of
Uh,
the person
I
you are now versus the person you were before you took your first one?
um I don't know if I've had a lot of drastic changes, but I definitely feel like I'm a much more easygoing person. I feel like I take the day and life's events and the little bumps in the road throughout the day a little bit more with a grain of salt. Definitely looking at possessions in a different way, and possessions that can be too much and overwhelming and just not necessary in your life. When you think about, you've walked 5 to 6 weeks with your possessions on your back, you do realize how little you need to survive and to meet your own needs. And I always come home, and I'm not going to say it lasts the whole year, Pam, I'm not, but I always come home with a real genuine renewed love for people that have needs, people that need me. So whether it's my family, my patients, my coworkers, I think I come home with a renewed compassion. And did I need it? Did I need it this time after the 18 months of pandemic or whatever it was before I left?
Yeah. How, I'm assuming anyone that goes in this next year will still be kind of pandemic. Were there different things on the Camino because of the pandemic, or things you need to be thoughtful of?
Surprisingly, there are no political issues going on in Spain regarding the pandemic. The residents don't talk about it. You don't see it on the news. The word COVID and the word vaccine did not come up during my 5 weeks there. It was shocking. A lot of residents, I think it's well over 90% in Spain and Portugal, have gotten a vaccine. They still continue to mask up, especially in bars and cafes and restaurants, because it's what they're told to do. And it doesn't make them puppets or robots, but it just makes it a very easy environment when everyone's just respecting everyone else and doing what they're told for right now. Outdoors, of course, masks were off. You could walk the Camino without your mask on. The albergues were a little more spaced out. So like a big albergue bunk room that might normally have 18 bunks, might have 8 bunks or 10 bunks. So there is definitely reduced availability at some of the public and smaller privately owned albergues. But again, there's fewer walkers too. So really it wasn't harder to find lodging at all. I wasn't asked for my vaccine card at any restaurant or bar. Again, you wear your mask in to be courteous and, try to keep it on until your meal is served or your wine. And I did not encounter, Pam, by the grace of God, I did not encounter one sick pilgrim in the whole time that I was there. 2 weeks walking the Primitivo, or 17 days on the Primitivo, and then 2 weeks traveling through Portugal just as a tourist. I did not encounter a sick individual. So, no one coughing at night in the albergues, it was really refreshing. So outside of the hoops you have to jump through to get into the countries, with the vaccine card and registering on their national websites for a QR code that gets you, through the airport and stuff.
So everyone that's coming into Spain has had to prove that they've been vaccinated, right?
Yep, they have, yeah. So you kind of do feel, I felt very safe, because knowing that my fellow pilgrims had all been vaccinated. Not that that's proof, but
Right. This last time you went, you had one of your cousins, he walked.
Yeah.
When you got back, as he describes his experience, what to you stands out?
Well, my cousin had wanted to do the Camino for about 3 years, but it hadn't worked out for him. He hadn't taken the plunge. He'd done a little bit of reading and research. He owned the book. He owned the manual. And when I suggested to him that he come along with me, he jumped at the chance. And my intention right from the get-go was that we would start together in the morning. We'd end up perhaps in the same town, but that we would still be our own entity as we trekked. And he's a fairly fit guy for his age, I would say, and he trained hard and he got hurt. He took a couple falls before we left, injured ribs, injured his knees. It was touch and go. So there I stand by my don't train too hard. You might get hurt. So the first couple of days, he was, oh gosh, I don't know how to describe it. He was focused. He was intense. He wanted to get out and get going by 7:30. He knew the itinerary. We had the stages mapped out for the Primitivo. He would walk ahead as a faster walker. But then what I was finding was he wasn't comfortable going ahead and staying ahead. And he even said the second day, I'm still going to stay with you. It was day 3 that we split ways, which was great because it is hard to walk knowing that someone's waiting for you somewhere, whether it's at a restaurant or at the next town. And he would walk ahead and he was probably then waiting for me 15, 30 minutes before I would round that corner. Day 3, however, we got into some bad weather and he ended up about 6 kilometers ahead of me. And because of the driving rain, and it actually was cold, he said, Shellie, just wherever you're at, just stop and stay. And I just listened to my little voice and his voice. And I was like, I was right by an albergue and I just stayed at a different town. And then from then on out, he had met some people and I said this publicly, Tim found his Camino legs and his Camino wings. And he really figured out that this was his journey. He wasn't there to stick with me or worry about me. I remember him asking me, and this might have been part of his decision. He asked me on the second day toward the end, or maybe it was the start of the third morning it was. And he said, what's it like to be walking alone as a woman on the Camino? And I looked at him and I tried to make him understand. I said, it's actually exhilarating. And so that was the last time I saw him. So yeah, he then I believe the night of day 3, ended up in a very special albergue with a very special hospitalero, kind of famous you'll get these different spots on the Camino where the different albergues are a little more famous or well known for being, just different, more spiritual, more in touch. You might have a very holistic experience with some groups. But he ended up at a place like that. And that guy, David, that hospitalero, really sat and talked with Tim that night about the Camino, what the Camino means to so many, the spirit of the Camino. And it clicked. The light bulb came on. And from then on, Tim was just, he said to me, he goes, I'm a changed person. He goes, I didn't know how hard this was. He goes, I couldn't have imagined how hard this would have been. Because he did take a physical beating as well, even as fit as he was. But he just really felt like he came home a changed person from his experience on the Primitivo. And that just made me incredibly happy.
Yeah. So when you think of the spirit of Camino, how people describe the spirit of the Camino?
Well, of course, a lot about the spiritual aspect of the Camino is just finding yourself, or seeing a new side of yourself, seeing another page of yourself. But I think this one guy, I believe his name was Ricardo, he helped me that morning retrieve my poles when I left him at an albergue. It was 6 kilometers back. I couldn't reach the albergue to tell them I needed them taxied. There was no way I was going over that hospitality's route without my poles. And in hindsight, Pam, I would have fallen 100 times and perished. And along came this Spanish man on his own Camino who spoke very good English, beautiful, handsome, silver-haired man. He got on the phone. He called my albergue. He called the albergue next to that, who went over and told them to pick up their darn phone. And they took my poles out to me. And he spent 20-25 minutes of this beautiful morning with me, delaying his huge 26-kilometer climb on the hardest day of the whole route.
Wow.
I remember thanking him profusely. And I can't quite verbatim share what he said, but he basically said, oh, this is no problem at all. We're all here on this Camino to help each other reach the same goal, to get to Santiago. And it just really, really resonated with me. And I wish I had seen that man again, because as a side note, he also was instrumental in that man picking me up in the taxi, that night when it was getting dark, when, the inns were all full. Roberto ended up, he was sitting next to that taxi driver, sitting in the bar when I called and we were trying to communicate. And with my broken Spanish and his non-English, literally this guy, I think his name was Roberto, he said, is this Shellie? This is Roberto. I met you this morning. Duh, I remember you. And he was the one that was actually talking to the taxi driver and explaining where I was on the road, and just said, hold tight, he's coming to get you. This man 2 times in one day saved my booty. And I never
provided.
Camino provided. And to me, that summarized the spirit of the Camino, which is just helping each other along so everyone can complete the path. And you can take that and apply it to your everyday life. I mean, this is what we're here to do every single day. We're all here to just get through each day with some degree of joy and peace and prosperity, and then move on to the next day, and it just really resonated with me this last trip, that one statement from a stranger, a beautiful stranger.
Wow. All right. So I know you have go-to books, your go-to favorite books for the Camino.
Oh, yeah. Basically, if you're thinking about doing the Francais, this is pretty much everyone's Bible. It's the Camino de Santiago Francais, and it's by a guy named John Brierly. And he he revamps this every year or two. And it's a little thicker, but it's super detailed. But what I love about John is he incorporates some spiritual, just, find yourself, find your soul type of thing all throughout the book. He's got spiritual notes or spiritual contemplations that that you can look at and refer to depending on where you land. And then for the Norte, we have just this basic little guide here. This was pretty much my Bible. And I always buy two, just so you know. I always buy.
And then you just carry them with you.
I'm a paper girl. Now, a lot of people will just have maps and things like that on their phone. And then the Primitivo, I went with the Matthew Harms book again. And then it was called A Wise Pilgrim. And between the two, you're just getting, the same map, but you're getting different albergues listed and just different instructions and different insights. So yeah, I try to carry two. And I highly recommend a great guidebook or two. You can pick your favorite and only bring one with you. They're not that heavy. And they're just in and out of your pocket all day long.
And then with your phone, did you have just international?
I did. I had Sprint, I believe, for my first two Caminos. So texting was free, and like international calling was like 30 cents a minute, Pam. It was really, really reasonable. This last time I have Verizon, and I did pay $10 a day. So I still, just factor that into the cost of doing business, going on a Camino. My cousin did go to a tech store, a phone store in, I think it was the Madrid airport, excuse me. And he bought what they call a SIM card.
Yep.
So phone carrier has an unlocked SIM card, and I can't explain what that means, but he then is able to open up where his SIM card is stored, take it out, the one that's in his phone, and put this one in that he bought for $30.
Yep. And use the SIM card while it was there.
Not lose the other one. Yeah. But with Verizon on my iPhone, my SIM card is locked by Verizon. So that option wasn't available to me.
Yeah.
And just paying the $10, it just was something I was just prepared to do.
Yeah. So when we circle back to this whole thing of, like, you talked about this being the best selfish thing you've done. And this whole way of, you said no to a lot of other things and you said yes to this. What do you say to someone that's struggling to give themselves this amount of time or do something that is in a good way selfish like this?
I hope that friends and family who see what I have chosen to do and allowed myself to do, I hope that it does inspire people to know that, they can do it too. They can make that choice too. I remember my sister saying to me, "You have made me not afraid to travel alone," and that was a compliment. But at the same time, recognizing there's a whole lot of people out there that really can't do this kind of thing, at least right now, not for the month, maybe. They could do a week. And that's the beauty of the Camino, is that you can go and do a week or 10 days. And then, the next year, go back, you pick up exactly where you left off. You do another week, another 10 days. And I met many, many people through all my Caminos that have done that. I met one group of gals that they had started walking from their home in Belgium, and they were on their 10th year, and they were completing the Norte that year. And
so they took 10 years to complete what you completed in 34 days.
Yes. And they started from up in Belgium, out their front door, and they were older than me. So it was amazing. And it was just amazing. So people do that kind of thing. It's a little harder for Americans because we have to travel so far just to take advantage of a 10-day or a 12-day trip, But a lot of Europeans do that. A lot of the Europeans and the Spaniards, they do not go and do the whole, 30, 34-day experience, or for the primitive, the whole 12 or 14 or 15-day experience. They do it in bits and pieces as their work schedule or their family schedules allow. So just recognizing that, like say that, there's a gal I work with, she would love to go, but she's a single mom with a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. I mean, just not in her cards right now. So I just try to, be encouraging to know that her day will come. And hopefully when her day comes where she has the time and the money and the freedom to do something this selfish, that then she's not afraid to do it.
Yeah. When you think of, as we get ready to wrap up, the most common things people ask you about the Camino.
Wow, how much does it cost? And honestly, you can do your Camino on 30 euros a day, or I think I was probably more of an average of 40 to 50 euros a day, which if you think about it, a day on vacation, spending $50, $55, this is not going to happen. It's not going to happen in the United States. It's not going to happen in most of Europe. It's not going to happen even in Mexico, or definitely not Hawaii. So that's definitely the most common. I get questions about the safety issue, or if I get lonely or scared. I think those are probably the most common questions. It's the most questions I get are definitely on the how-tos or the how muches.
Yeah. And absolutely don't forget this gear list. If you were giving people absolute gear, because you've talked about the rain, you've talked about the poles, but if we were making an absolute gear list, what would be the top things you want to make sure you pack?
Okay, a sleeping bag. Don't get fooled by all the websites or all the bloggers who tell you that you only need a sleeping bag liner, because it doesn't matter if it's May, June, or September. Some of these albergues, or sometimes you're sleeping on the floor of a monastery and it is absolutely freezing and you're there with your little sleeping bag liner. So that was my first big mistake, is I did not bring a sleeping bag. So my second trip, I went out to REI and I got the lightest weight sleeping bag I could find. It was a couple $100. It wasn't a fortune, but it is beautiful. It's warm and it weighs, I think, 1 pound, 4 ounces.
Wow.
Yeah. And I put it right in the back, right where my behind hits at the lower part of my pack, and that's where it lives. And if you're staying at a private albergue, a lot of times you're going to have a clean sheet and a thin blanket, and you're not going to pull out your sleeping bag. So you might only use it half the time. But I will never be caught again without my sleeping bag.
Okay.
Because
sleeping bag.
Yep. The best shoes, the shoes that work for you. And there's people that love Keens and there's people that love Nikes, and I'm a Hoka girl. But shoes that you love and that work for you, and please don't make them brand new and head out without that with new shoes. The sock liners. And the hiking poles. Now, that's kind of age related. I'm going to be honest, you do see most young people without poles. But let's say if you have any tendency for osteoarthritis, or you've got a bum knee or ankle, if you're over 40, just plan on having hiking poles. They give you balance, stability. My cousin was shocked at how much better he could propel himself uphill with poles, because you're putting that strength from your arms into pulling your body up the hill. They give you stability going down hills. They save your knee. So poles are, I couldn't do it without poles.
Moleskin,
the Compeed, tiny first aid kit, some Band-Aids, comfortable pants. You don't want something that's going to chafe or rub. So some comfortable, athletic style outdoor pants, whether they're looser or a tighter fabric.
And then what about rain gear? You said it rained a lot. What?
You definitely need a good raincoat, but I really have found the poncho, a poncho is better, and because you are going to have 3 or 4 torrential days in the rain. So you need a really lightweight poncho, not a rubbery one, but one of those really lightweight ones that almost feel like parachute light parachute material. And it has to be the kind of style that has a hump built into it for your backpack.
So it covers your backpack and then your back.
Yeah, because otherwise your backpack starts getting wet with a regular poncho because it doesn't cover it. And then that water starts soaking up your back. A poncho and ideally a lightweight pair of rain pants. I bought both of those at REI. I probably spent $140 on the 2 pieces, but I'll have them forever. And they're so lightweight, but they're such great insurance because if you're soaked, you can't finish your day. And I know there's waterproof socks out there. My shoes are supposed to be waterproof, but they really aren't. But I can walk with wet feet as long as you've got your double socks and you're warm because you're moving. I didn't get any blisters from having wet feet.
And you said you didn't get sick and you didn't see other people that were sick. Did you take a lot of vitamin C or was it just all of the house wine or?
All fresh air and exercise, Pam. I really do. Yeah. And just the mental food that you're getting along the way. And on my other Caminos, I have bunked with sick people. A lot of coughing, a lot of hacking, but I was just really blessed on this trip in particular during the pandemic to not be laying in a bed at night listening to someone cough their guts out.
Yeah, because that might be unnerving right about now, right? In a pandemic.
That might would be. Yeah.
All right, Shellie, I'm so excited, mostly inspired that you've done this not only once, twice, 3 times, you're going back again a 4th time, that I'm making a commitment to going. And just this whole idea of this, I love how you described this as you gave yourself permission to do something that is a good selfish.
Yeah.
No, and this idea of starting to do things that delight us and that we want to do in this life.
Because time is short, as we all are learning. And this experience, not only does it feed you for a lifetime, but it gets you through the whole next year. And then, I'm recharging myself. I think I've become a lifer on the community or on the Camino, but it just charges me up and keeps me going and keeps me focused until the next time I can go. You come home from this trip and you shut your eyes to go to sleep and you're seeing your Camino, you're seeing the path in front of you and you're hearing the clunk of your shoes and the jabbing of your sticks. And it's just weird. You think about the Camino for weeks and months after you get home. So yeah.
Okay, so what do they say on the Camino? What do they say? Buen Camino?
Buen Camino, good walk, good way. Buen or bon, but it's buen, B-U-E-N, good Camino. Buen Camino. Buen Camino.
Good Camino. We've had a good way today, and I'm so excited to share this, and I'm so inspired by you. Yeah. So if you guys want to follow her, it's on Facebook, it's Shellie Finholm, right?
Yes, Finholm. Oh, it's Shellie Finholm. Sorry.
Shellie Finholm, and she shares every moment. I don't know, you have great reception, so all your photos, like what do you do? Take photos during the day and then you just post them, and we saw every day.
Yeah. No, that's the beauty about, the phone reception is pretty decent in Spain. I think there was one day this time where I didn't have reception for about 5 hours, but that was it. So yeah. You can still give and receive texts, and you can still look at Facebook, and it's great to be a little unplugged, definitely on your trip as much as possible. But you're definitely not isolated unless you choose to be, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for sharing your story, Shellie.
Yeah, and then in a year when we go, Pam, we'll turn the tables, and I'm going to interview you.
All right. And I hope I'm as inspiring. I hope I say, yeah, I never thought about giving up.
Well,
and I didn't get sick, and I made it to the end.
It's really completing your Camino. It's mental. It's not physical. I promise.
And that's the message for all of us about anything. Deciding, right, is most of it.
Yeah, if you want to do it, it will happen.
All right. Thank you for this time.
Well, thank you for the interview. It was very enjoyable.